Oh, I wanted to love you. I wanted it to be great, and I wanted things to be perfect forever after. But you, new Wouxun KG-Q10H, you're going back to the factory. Stick around and let me tell you why right now on Ham Radio, dude. I was recently watching this video about this new Wouxun KG-Q10H, and it looked like a very promising radio, so I purchased it for $219. Unboxing the radio, I was very impressed with the quality packaging that was used on this radio, and furthermore, I immediately charged this radio up. And by the way, USB-C charging, or a cradle charger. I digress though, I charged this radio up and I started going through the menus and becoming more and more familiar with what this radio has to offer. After a good 8 or 12 hours of going through all the different menus, I put the radio on the charger, and I went to bed for the evening. When I woke up the next day, I decided, hey, I should probably start testing the power levels and check this thing on the spectrum analyzer just to get an idea of how it looks. Although I was very confident, especially with an FCC certification and a US distributor, that this radio was going to meet my standards. I want to share with you my findings and then I'll continue on with the story. But let's take a look on 6 meters, 2 meters, 1.25 meters, and 70 centimeters about the power output. Today I'm using the MFJ 849 digital power meter using LMR 400 into an MFJ dummy load. And in order to run the cable from my radio into the actual power meter, I'll be using a very small piece, about 1.5 feet of RG8X. To get started, this is the MFJ meter that I'm talking about. And yes, I do have this set to HF because we're in the 50 megahertz range, which means that we have to use our HF port on the meter, okay? And we're gonna start off on what will be considered low power. I'm now on low power on what would be 6 meters. We're getting 1.83 watts out. Let me write that down. So on low power, that doesn't seem necessarily horrible. Let me go to mid power.
Transmit power, enter.
We're getting less power on mid power than we are on high power. W9FFF, 1.66 watts. So initially my first thought is maybe there's something going on with the firmware. That's a bug that could be fixed. They got an M and an L mixed up somewhere and some kind of statement for programming or coding the radio. Not necessarily a huge deal. Let's continue on with the test. Now we're going to go to high power.
Mid transmit power, enter.
And I'm putting out 3.76 watts, we'll call it. Regardless, now let's go ahead and go to very high or ultra high power.
Enter.
And we're putting out about 4.14 watts. And again, this is on 6 meters. Let me go ahead and swap out the back ports here so we can go to VHF and we'll test out 2 meters, 1.25 meters, and 70 centimeters. On 2 meters at 146.505, again, a fully charged battery. And we're going to
Transmit power.
start an ultra high power. An ultra high power here, we're getting about 4.20 watts. And then let's go ahead and go down to high, mid, and low. You'll see it right now.
Transmit power, enter.
This is high.
Mid transmit power, enter.
And this is mid, 1.64 watts. And finally, let's go to low power.
Mid transmit power, enter.
0.81 watts. Okay, so far we've tested 6 meters and we've tested 2 meters, and 2 meters does somewhere around 4.5 watts on ultra high power, which I guess is fine. Again, this is advertised as a 6 watt radio, so we may see 6 watts somewhere within all these bands. And I'm only testing one frequency. Let's go ahead and go to 220. Now we're on 223.440, and we have the meter here. Let's start with ultra high power again.
Transmit power, enter.
All right, ready for this? That's ultra high power. Let's go to high power now.
Mid transmit power, mid transmit power, transmit power, enter.
And here we are in high power. Now I'm gonna confirm that again, just to be sure here. High power, 1.10 watts. Ultra high power,
Transmit power, enter.
1.10 watts. Let's try low and mid power. We'll start with mid and then we'll go to low.
Mid transmit power, enter.
0.36 watts.
Mid
Now low power,
transmit power, enter.
0.10 watts on 1.25 meter band. Now all we have to do is go to UHF and see how that looks. So I'm going to find myself a simplex frequency on UHF. I'll be right back. Oh yeah, there's a dog over there sleeping, and if you like this video, he'll get a cookie. So now we are finally at 70 centimeters, and I'm at 446.100. Again, we're going to start with ultra high power.
Transmit power, Enter.
And we are we're good to go. Ready? Oh, actually, we saw 6 watts there. W9FFF. We saw 6 watts there for just a moment, and it leveled out. You know, what is it, like 5.85 watts, 5.90 watts. It is slowly decreasing, but that's okay. We're going to call that 6 watts. I think that's safe. Now let's go down to high power.
Mid transmit power. Enter.
About 4.3 watts. Now we'll go to mid.
Transmit power. Enter.
And we're at about 1.1, 1.25 watts, somewhere right around there. Finally, let's go to low power.
Mid transmit power. Enter.
And about a 0.3 watts. I was going to say a quarter watt, but 0.35 watts, 0.36 watts. Okay, yeah. So 0.3 watts on low. I wasn't necessarily disappointed with the power outputs, and I actually like to have super low power outputs. That way I can conserve as much battery as possible. However, there's a couple of things there that just don't seem right, especially 6 meters having your low power higher power than your mid power. And, essentially having the same amount of power output on 2 of the settings in, 2 meters? Hey, sorry about that, 1.25 meters. Then in order to kind of confirm what I was seeing on the power output on 6 meters, I hooked this up to my spectrum analyzer. And after all, we would think that this radio, being sold by a US distributor and sold with an FCC certification, which if you look up online, the FCC ID looks like it passed the test with flying colors. But then when I take a look at here on the spectrum, I become a little concerned. And I do want to share this with you before I send this off to Wouxun, or the manufacturer, the distributor. There we go, the distributor. And I do want them to test it so that we can confirm my findings, and if there is a larger problem, it could be addressed. Furthermore, I won't be testing this for the waterproof rating today because I need to send it back to the distributor so they could test it. That should actually say that if they want to test it, because I can't tell them what to do nor demand it, It's kind of unfortunate. Each of my tests were conducted on ultra high power per each band. So for example, 6 meters ultra high power was 4.20 watts. And I converted that number, 4.20 watts, to dBm. From there, I added on 25 microwatts. Additionally, it's a log equation that you could do to determine how much attenuation is needed on each of your tests. And so for 6 meters, as you can see here, I tested 6 meters, and our fundamental emission was 33.27 dBm with our attenuation at 53 dB, meaning I have a 40 dB attenuator and an additional 13 on the Regal. But anyway, 33.27, and then we have our first harmonic, if you will, which is negative 11.93 dBm. The difference between those is greater than 40 dB, and that's good. We want to make sure that we have more than 40 dB between our primary and those harmonics or spurs. But I didn't want to necessarily go through and explain each one of these as much as show you the results, and you can interpret them in the comments below for everybody else. Somebody who might have much more experience, and that's where it's important also for me to, while I show you 2 meters, explain that this test equipment might be different than anybody else's test equipment, and we also all might get very different results. There could be a number of reasons for our different results. For example, I'm in a room that is definitely not RF tight or sealed or friendly, and there could be a little bit of sway in my results for that reason, but also quality control issues per radio. Depending on what radio you might find different results. Maybe the results that I got on 2 meters, 6 meters, 1.25 meters, and 70 centimeters aren't the same results you get. And speaking of 2 meters, let's take a look at it. Here we could see our fundamental emission at 40 dBm. With 53 dB of attenuation total, our primary or fundamental frequency is 29.16, and our harmonic is negative 8.17, which is a difference of just like I said, 37.33 dB. And therefore, this radio doesn't, at least my radio, doesn't pass the emission standards as outlined in Part 97.307, Sections A through F of the FCC rules and regulations, which is upsetting if this is accurate, as I paid $219 for this. Take a look here at 1.25 meters, and you'll notice here on 1.25 meters, we have only 7 dB of attenuation internally, and then externally 40, so 47 dB total. And that's because on 1.25 meters, our maximum output power is only like 1.1 watts. Yeah, like 1.1 watts. And so that's why we see our 1 delta, or our fundamental emission, at 37.99, And for 2 delta, we see negative 14.83 dBm. Here we are on 70 centimeters. And on 70 centimeters, you could see that my fundamental with 54 dB of attenuation is 36.45 dBm. And that puts our secondary or our first harmonic at negative 28.05 dB. So I did reach out to the company that I purchased this from and I let them know of my findings and hopefully we'll have a positive outcome. I would like to hope that it's only my radio that has this issue with the harmonics. According to statistics, in 2012, 100% of the Wouxun radios that were tested at the ARRL were found to be in compliance. They tested 16 radios. In 2013, 26 radios were tested and only 77% of them were found to be in compliance, with 4% being considered borderline passing and the other 19% being non-compliant. In 2014, there were a total of 15 Wouxun radios tested for compliance, with 67% of them actually being compliant, none of them being borderline, and that means that 33% of them failed the compliance standards. Things looked really promising the next year when 22 were tested, 86% passed, and that left 14% to be non-compliant. Here we are in 2023, and I purchased a radio that did cost me a lot of money. I am hopeful that it was only my radio, and I'm hopeful that this issue will be resolved because even if I have a quad band radio that does crossband repeat and a million other things, has a beautiful screen, I kind of have to set an example myself, right? But furthermore, if I was a new amateur radio operator who decided to spend $219 on a super het receiver, quad band radio, and I found out I could have just bought a Baofeng for $30 that was unlocked and also not compliant, maybe not have the super het, I might be a little upset. That's food for thought. I'm not saying that this radio is not as good as a $30 radio. Let's just get that clear. But I am saying that the standard, at least on my radio that I received, is not to par. And I will send it back, and hopefully they'll test it and let me know that I was completely wrong in my results. But also, hopefully, if you have the test equipment at home, you could test yours and either confirm the results that I have found or deny them. Again, I'd love to be wrong on this one. And I'm actually really not enjoying testing radios when every radio comes to my hand is a problem. I'm going to leave it at that right now. I just hope you have a good one. Take care, and this is the channel Ham Radio Dude 73.